Welcome. We'd like to, all of us here in the studio this evening, would like to welcome you to a special live phone-in. The subject is the Balfour-Brilliant Environmental Management Plan. Now, some of you may have received this in the mail, and which you should have by Sunday, I believe, and you may have watched our program that preceded this one. So before we get into it, what I'm going to do briefly is have each of the gentlemen in the studio introduce themselves. And I think we'll start with you, John.
John Dyck, Regional Water Manager, Water Management Branch.
Mm-hmm. And what's your position?
Regional Manager.
Okay, great.
I'm Al Soobotin. I'm a Regional Habitat Biologist for Fisheries and Wildlife Branch, and I'm here to represent wildlife interests.
Okay.
Bob Lindsey, I'm a Fisheries Biologist from Nelson.
Okay.
And Barry Wood from the Waste Management Branch, and I'm the head of the municipal section.
Great. Okay. So there we have, these are the gentlemen that you'll be able to direct your questions to tonight, and we do encourage you to phone in. Now, this is just one part of all the work that the ministry has gone to get this information out to the public. You've received some of this information in the mail. This program is part of it. This phone-in program is part of it. But what also will be happening is there will be open houses scheduled throughout Nelson in the end of this month, January. And I'm just going to briefly go over them with you right now. So, January the 24th, from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Brent Kennedy School. January the 25th, from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. and at the West Kootenay Visitor Center, that's at Kokanee Creek Park. And January the 26th, from 1 o'clock to 9 p.m. at the Eagles Hall in Nelson here. And January 27th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. also at the Eagles Hall. One thing that they're trying to do is encourage written information. But if you're a little bit shy about that, or if you have a question that you want to write in about, there will be surveys at the open house that you can fill in there. But if you want to formulate your questions more carefully and take some time with it, you can direct them to the Regional Director at the Ministry of Environment, 310 Ward Street, Nelson, British Columbia, V1L5S4. And please put on your envelopes, read the Balfour-Brilliant Environmental Management Plan. Or, if you don't want to write in, you can phone. The phone number recommended is 354-6347. Please tell the person who's answering the phone who you know, what department you want your question directed to. That person may not be able to respond immediately, but if you leave your phone and your name, your phone number and your name, they'll get back to you as quickly as possible. I realize that in this brief summary that we received in the mail, there's a lot of questions that are open. A more detailed technical document is available at various places throughout Nelson, and this was outlined on page 1 of this report. So you could go to the City Hall or the Ministry of Environment office or the library or any of the high school libraries or the Chamber of Commerce or the Regional District of Central Kootenay or Selkirk College at the Rosemont campus and pick up, no, you can't pick up a copy of the report there, but you can look at it and perhaps photocopy what information you need to know. If you live in South Slocan, it's at Selkirk College at the Crescent Valley campus, at Brent Kennedy School, or at Mount Sentinel School. And if you live on the North Shore, it's at West Kootenay Visitor Center, and if you live in Castlegar, at Selkirk College. Okay? So the phone number to call here is 354-4200. This is Shaw Cable. If you have any questions, we urge you to phone in, and any of these gentlemen would be glad to answer any of your questions. So, I'm glad you all could come and answer these questions because I certainly would not be able to. That's great you're here. We had a few questions that have been phoned in or people have asked about already, and so I'm going to just open up this discussion and get it the ball rolling a bit by directing a question to Barry Wood here, who's with the Waste Management Branch. This person had asked, why is the Ministry of Environment concerned about water quality along the north shore of the West Arm?
I guess the first thing I'd like to just stress is that generally the water quality in the West Arm is good. Where we have some concerns about some specific areas along the north shore opposite Nelson. Over the last several years we've done some shoreline type monitoring, and we've found some indications that seepage from septic tank systems is reaching the arm, and we're concerned if this trend continues that there will be a serious problem. So we don't have what we see as a serious problem yet, but the preliminary indication that there may be one developing.
So at this point in time, you're monitoring these situations, right? How are you going to enforce that, or how are these situations going to be corrected, like a water septic tank field that's seeping?
Yeah, it is a rather complex problem. We're dealing with several levels of local government and several ministries. The individual sewage treatment plant or septic systems on the shore are administered by the Ministry of Health, and we're looking at the water quality impacts of a collective problem of a number of systems that are seeping into the arm. So it's going to resolve the problem, it's going to require a joint effort of a number of levels of government, local government as well as provincial agencies, and as well as the interest and involvement of the local people. So that's partly why we're wanting to encourage involvement in this plan to make the public aware of the problem and how they might participate in the solutions.
Okay, thanks, Barry. I believe we have a caller online right now. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
Good evening.
Barry, Dave Pierce.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah, you know that I disagree with your findings with regards to the North Shore.
Yes.
We did a little study a little while ago, and $1,500 we spent on it, $2,000, and we came up with no visible pollution to speak of outside of one count of 5, one count of 3.8, compared to the other side of the lake, which was much, much higher in places. Now, I've got no argument with your intentions, but I would like to, I wonder whether you would make available to the regional district and to Earl Hamilton a copy of that survey which you quote here on page 3, which says in effect that some 50% are non-compliant and over 25% are causing trouble. I can read the fact to you. You're familiar with it, of course, are you?
Yeah, Dave, that study...
it says here that you quote that over 50% anyway are one half in non-compliance with the health regulations, and you note that there are many cases where there are septic systems, seepage from septic systems. Now, will you make those available to the regional district so perhaps our regional director can do something in conjunction with the people to correct it, since the health department apparently hasn't?
Yeah, Dave, as you indicate, that study was done by the Ministry of Health, not by us. And I believe that it's already been given to the regional district. If not, we certainly can get them a copy. I guess the other thing I'd like to just comment on is I know the study that you folks did was basically looking at the water quality in around the midpoint of the West Arm, and as I said earlier, the water quality in the arm is generally acceptable. What we've been looking at is water quality immediately along the shoreline, where the majority of people who live and recreate in the arm concentrate their activities. And so our data really is not in conflict. We're just looking at two different areas, and where we look, there's definitely indications of a...
Can I have one more question?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Barry, two more questions, actually. There are a couple of known violators on the North Shore with regard to septic tanks. And I'm often curious as to why your department didn't, or why the health department, sorry, not you, the health department did not have something done about it. Because obviously If you know who does it, you know who's to blame, you can get them to do something about it. That's the first one. The second comment is that what is the cost going to be of all this study and plan and so on and so forth? Have you got any figures on that at all?
Yeah, I do, Dave. I guess with regard to your first question, it might be out of place for me to comment on one of our sister agencies and their enforcement policies, but I understand that the problem involves more than just several septic tanks. There's, as there are studies that indicated, there's many of them having problems on the North Shore, so it does go beyond one or two isolated problems, and obviously we'll be having discussions with the Ministry of Health, and in fact they'll be attending the open houses with us to explain their side of the problem they see.
Well, Barry,
Yeah.
instead of just talking back and forth as we're doing,
Yeah.
why not make available, let's say to the regional district, a copy of where these sites are, so something can be done about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard this talk back and forth from the health department and the regional district people and from ourselves for years. How about doing something about it? Make the sites available where these troubles are to the regional district. Get them involved. Get them to help do something about each of those sites.
Well, I certainly don't have any problem with that, but Dave, as I said, it's the Ministry of Health report, so I'll have to discuss that with them and then pass on your concerns.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for calling. Okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Barry?
Well, actually, there was a second part of his question that we didn't really get to, and he was talking about possible costs of solving the problem, and we do have some ballpark figures, and none of the options that we looked at are cheap by any means. They all will involve, I believe, higher costs for individuals for their sewage disposal. If you don't have any other calls waiting, we could take a couple minutes and go over some of the options.
Let's do that.
Okay. I guess the basic first option you might call the status quo, where you deal with the systems that are presently in place and are presently failing, and you do your best, or the Ministry of Health does their best, along with the individuals who live on the North Shore, to patch up the systems or to repair them as best they can. I just did a rough calculation based on the number of systems we believe are having problems, and it looks like it might something in the range of $500,000 to fix up the systems that are presently in distress over there.
I'll just ask you a quick question here. Like, what about the individual property owner? Do you have any idea about how much approximately?
I took a guesstimate based on, say, $4,000 to $5,000 to replace a system.
I see. Okay.
So that would be called the status quo, but to make that effective, you've got to add a second component to it, where you
All right.
restrict development on properties that can't handle ground disposal systems, where you don't allow systems to go in where they're going to fail because of problems in the soils and that kind of thing.
We do have other calls now,
Okay,
Barry, so
sure.
I'll let you off the hook on this one. Okay. Hello, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First, I'd like to offer sincere gratitude and congratulations to your guests. And my question is quite simple. How may the public at large best help environmentally minded local management experts like yourselves?
Do you want to direct this question to anyone in particular, or I'll...
I think Mr. McDonald could answer it, or
Mr. McDonald isn't here, so...
Mr. Wood?
Mr. Wood? Well, Barry, back to you.
Okay, I guess one answer to it is be involved in what we're trying to achieve here. We have gone to a lot of effort to get our plan, our draft plan, out to the public, and we sincerely want the public involved in examining these options, to talk to us, to come to the open houses, to write to us, to phone as you suggested, and the plan is not cast in stone at this point. It's an attempt to get on top of the problems as we see them emerging, and to look at options and to involve the public in the solutions. So come out and talk to us at the open houses and share what you have to share with us.
Great.
I'll see you at the visitor center.
Great.
Thank you very much for calling. Okay. Thanks once again, Barry. We have other calls, do we not? Oh, I have to give them a minute. So, Bob, do you have anything that you'd like to add to what Barry just said?
No, only that, you know, I just have to reiterate some of the things that Barry said, that we certainly welcome people to come out to the meetings and give us their views. As Barry said, this is just a plan. It isn't etched in stone. And we want to know what people think.
I do believe that there will be a representative from each section of the ministry at each of these open houses, except for pesticides, because it's a bit short-staffed there, correct?
Yes, there'll be someone there representing most of the areas that are involved in the plan.
Okay, we do have another caller. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I too appreciate the forum and the whole attempt to get public information. I have a question for John Dyck. I actually have two questions. The first one is, when was the last time there was a flood which caused personal or property damage within the Balfour-Brilliant area? And secondly, how will the potential quick release of snowmelt from clear-cut logging in these drainages affect flooding in the future?
Okay, in answer to your first question, the last flood of significant magnitude, there has been some isolated damage on various years throughout the last while, even though we have had some relatively low snowpacks for the last 10 years. The last significant flood that caused problems and damages on a lot of streams in the area occurred in the spring of 1974. Now, with respect to your second question of clear-cutting, clear-cutting certainly has the potential to add to the peak flow that occurs when your snow melt occurs in May and June. And extreme care has to be taken in the planning and operational phases of logging developments to try and offset those kind of effects. And there are mechanisms in terms of aspect and elevation modifications and limiting the size and amount of area that's harvested to address that problem.
Thank you, John. I was just wondering how much interaction you have with forestry in limiting, like you say, the areas and size of these clear cuts which might cause potential damages.
Okay, the involvement we have with the Ministry of Forest varies in terms of priorities that we've assigned to various watersheds that we have the most concern with. They're all important, but due to staff limitations, our primary involvement with the Ministry of Forests is in community watersheds, i.e. those watersheds that supply water to towns, municipalities, and some of the other heavily licensed watersheds where, even though they're not recognized as community watersheds, there are a large number of people that draw water from those streams. So those are the areas that we concentrate on. We do get referrals from the Ministry of Forests in other areas as well, but we are not able to deal with them in nearly as detailed a manner.
I understand that. I hate to be a glutton, but I have one more question. In regards to flood control, what types of things might you illustrate for the public in dealing with quick release snowmelt or other flood problems on these streams?
Well, the primary thing is you don't want to be too close, because erosion is always a factor. So generally the first thing you want to ensure is that you're set back from the stream so that you can allow for a certain amount of erosion before your dwelling or some other building is in imminent danger of collapse into the stream. Secondly, you would want to be elevated such that any overland flow is not going to cause immediate problems to installations such as furnaces or your insulation. So you want to be elevated above ground. Those are things that are up to an individual property owner basically to do with his own development. Then there are other things that can be done which tend to be more collective, although they can be individual as well, in terms of rock riprap armament or other means of armoring the bank of a stream such that the water flows in attacking the bank do not erode the soil. You can also put up dikes. And there is also a measure, and at times it becomes necessary, of doing a certain amount of channel maintenance, i.e. removal of debris which could be logs or gravel buildups that present a major problem. That becomes very sensitive, particularly in streams that have high fisheries values, and it's not an activity that we at all encourage as a ministry.
So in your document you mentioned that most of the fish production is in a natural sense in the streams through the West Arm. I'm just wondering what the likelihood of doing any channeling on any of these water courses like Sitcombe or Duhamel or kokanee or redfish or harrop might be in the future.
Well, it hasn't been ruled out, but as I said, it's very sensitive and it has to be integrated with other values in the area. And all the values, including the development values in the area, have to be looked at, and we have to then determine what our choices are. And if one of the choices happens to be doing some channel clearing, then it has to be done in a manner to minimize any kind of adverse impacts, and in fact it may have to be that special means have to be taken to try and rebuild habitat in some manner. But the two generally are not very compatible, and this is one of the areas in which I think, as Barry mentioned earlier, we certainly want people input, because there are going to have to be some choices at some places, and making those choices require the valuable input from the people, and we certainly encourage you to come out.
Thanks very much for answering these questions, and I'd just like to mention that I, for one, would be sorely against any impact on these stream beds. Good luck.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Okay. We have another call coming in shortly? Okay. Well, then I have another question. Okay. I'd like to direct this to Bob. One concerned listener wanted to know, does water for fish take precedent over licensed holders?
Well, I definitely have to say no, but of course, to try and optimize fish production in any stream, you would ideally want as much water as possible. Mm-hmm. Of course, most streams along the West Arm are licensed, and existing license holders would certainly take precedent over fish for water. Mm-hmm. We're willing to try and produce as many fish as we possibly can, given the water that's left after license use is taken off.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but this means in the future that a licensed, this might all change. Like, people will have their licenses, they'll be able to maintain them and keep them. Mm-hmm. But for future housing developments, I mean, things are going to change. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, future housing developments, of course, they want water, and
right.
There are other alternatives to taking water from the streams. Mm-hmm. You know, Barry, I'm sure, would have some comments on the coliform levels in the streams in the West Arm, and they have been fairly high. So there are other alternatives.
Like?
Wells.
Wells.
Primarily wells.
Primarily wells. Okay. Did you want to add anything to that, Barry, or?
No, not really.
Okay.
Probably if we're going to talk about water quality in streams, we probably should direct it to John, and
right.
They've been watching that more closely from...
Okay. We do have another call right now, too, so we'll answer that. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for the opportunity for asking our questions on this subject tonight. This is a general question. Perhaps anyone in the group can answer it.
Okay.
I'm curious about the plan itself and what happens to it after all the public input comes into you. Are you in a position, is your ministry in a position to legislate policy that will come after you make decisions about this plan, or do you have to go to another governmental agency? Will this plan go on, or is there something that you directly can do to implement the policy that you decide on after you get public input?
Well, who would like to start by answering this question?
I can take part
Okay.
of it. The plan is very broad in that it covers many issues.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those issues, once we receive public input, can be developed into policies and implemented immediately. Other aspects of the issues involved are going to require the cooperation of other provincial ministries, perchance, or the regional district in some issues that involves private land uses and designations thereon. Some of the other issues, while they're basically within our mandate, we really don't have enabling legislation for possibly the direction that some of the policies might go, which thus might mean that we may have to go back to say this is important, and we recognize it as important in terms of ministry branches and staff in the area, and recognize that it can't be enabled right now with existing legislation in some areas. For instance, matters of water quality, for instance, there really is very limited legislation on water quality in this province at the present time. And hence, some of the aspects of water quality may require legislation, and legislation in this area is being explored and discussed at this time. But it's a broad mix depending on the issues. And some things, as I mentioned, can be implemented very quickly, possibly. Others may take some period of time. But what we're trying to do here is chart a course of where we as a ministry are going to go in the context, to a large degree, of the input that we expect of the people in this area, indicating to us where do they see this general plan area going within the next 10 years, say. And some of the things may take some time to reach.
Thank you very much.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess to a certain extent. Essentially, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that you have power to implement some parts of this plan, and essentially you would have to act as an advisory body to encourage legislation in other areas that you don't have direct control over. Am I understanding you correctly?
That's correct. Now, the majority, I would say somewhere in the neighborhood, probably of 3/4 of the things, I think we can act on fully, or at least to a significant degree, immediately once we receive public input. There are other areas where we have to have the cooperation of other agencies in terms of implementing some of the things. And then, as I mentioned, in water quality, for instance, we don't have any enabling legislation on water quality at this point in time. A lot of it is policy that is maybe government policy as impacted by policies of various ministries. But direct legislation with teeth is not existent at this point in time, but as I mentioned, is being worked on. And I think in terms of a number of these things which may present some hurdles for us to cross, again, I think it's important that we receive some input in this regard from the public, which I think will help us to chart courses.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling. Anyone want to add something to that, or?
I guess I'd like to echo some of the things John said, that particularly with the problems we're looking at with some of the water quality and waste management concerns on the North Shore, that, as I said, we have the Ministry of Health involved in regulating individual systems. The land use controls are under the regional district. The city of Nelson occupies one shore of the arm, and so you have various levels of government and quite an interesting mix of levels of involvement that we need to bring some of these options into being. So.
How do you coordinate all that?
That's difficult because, as John said, we don't have direct control over a lot of the aspects, the options, the directions we'd like to see being explored and developed. So it's a matter of involving the public and local politicians in explaining the problems and the options as we see them, and encouraging them to participate in the solutions.
Yeah, I think I'd like to stress that aspect of it, is that many issues are getting more complex every day, and it isn't simple to solve problems anymore, and it certainly isn't in the manner that it was, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, where some person in some position maybe made a decision on something. I think we need to stress that there are various levels of government involved, and I don't see that changing, and that it's going to require the collective efforts and team efforts of many participants to effectively solve many of the problems and issues that are facing us.
Does anyone have any idea at all how long it's going to take to implement something like this? Like, you're just in the planning stages right now, and you've taken how many, 2 years? Is that correct? Roughly 2 years to get this far. Next, we're having a public input. It'll take a little while to collate all that material and input that into the system. I don't know how long, if there's an idea as to how long it's going to take to do that. I mean, does anyone have any idea how long it's going to take to start implementing any of this at all, or?
Well, I think the objective, once we have the public input, and then there's the open houses, I should say, and then there's a period of time given subsequent to that, I believe to about the middle of February or thereabouts, for people to write in comments. But the objective is, once that time frame has been completed, and work will be started immediately following the open houses, to collate and get that information into a form that shows trends and aspirations of the local citizens. And that objective is to have that completed prior to the end of winter or very early spring. And then, as I said in my earlier comments, the implementation, some of it can be done very soon after that, I think, but other things are going to take time, and some of them are obviously, or may very well, I shouldn't say obviously, may very well fall into the political arena if there's legislation required.
Right. And can you foresee legislation being required? Anybody?
Well, I believe that some legislation in the foreseeable future is going to be required respecting water quality.
I think so too. Oh, we have a phone call. All right. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi.
Mr. Lindsey, I guess this is one to direct this to. The Federal Fisheries Report stated that the lake contained few nutrients and was very, very clean. And this was probably the major reason for a decline in the fishery here in this area. Now, if we are going to keep the lake and the water quality cleaner than clean, or more than clean, aren't we at cross purposes here?
Not really, because what you're talking about is primarily the main lake, and the problems in the main lake are somewhat different from the West Arm. The main problem in the main lake is lack of nutrients, and primarily as a result of the Duncan and Libby dams. The Libby Dam acting as a nutrient sink. None of the natural nutrients that traditionally came down the system are ending up in Kootenay Lake any longer. And of course, Kootenay Lake is very lacking in nutrients. Nutrients have dropped over 50%. The problems in the West Arm are a little different. There's really not a nutrient problem in the West Arm.
Well, may I add to the question then? I understand that the government did put in a program of nutrients, and they were dropped at the opening of the West Arm rather than at the other end of the lake. And if the West Arm didn't need them, and this is a very fast-flowing current, why was the program initiated at the opening of the West Arm rather than on the main lake?
Yeah, we did have a fertilization
That's what I mean.
program in the West Arm in 1986 and 87. And that was at the time when we thought one of the main problems with kokanee production in the West Arm was indeed lack of nutrients. And we fertilized the arm right at Balfour with phosphorus to try and promote algal growth in the bays and thus increase fish production.
Have you any idea whether there will be a typical or a similar program on the main lake at the other end?
Yes, we are there's a fellow in Vancouver, Limnotech Consultants. They're right now looking at a feasibility study to actually fertilize the north end of Kootenay Lake and the main lake.
And do you have any results from the West Arm, and what was the cost? Did it justify the cost?
The results in the West Arm, they certainly increased algal growth in the bays and probably increased particularly kokanee production a little bit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. Did you want to add anything else to that, Bob? Or?
Yeah, when we fertilized the West Arm, as I mentioned before, we thought that was the primary problem with kokanee production in the West Arm, but we ended up net penning some kokanee in the West Arm just to see if it was food limited, and it wasn't. So we're looking at other things in the West Arm. We think one of the main problems right now is predation, and so we're net penning kokanee at present to try and get them to a larger size so they can escape predators much easier.
So does that? So who's increased in the food chain that's eating? Who are the predators?
Squawfish,
Squawfish,
suckers.
Right.
There's a large number of those species in the West Arm.
And why would they have increased? Is there?
Well, they've always been there, and
Yeah.
given that that the kokanee populations have decreased so much over the years, and fewer fish coming out of the streams, those fewer fish are sought after much more.
Right. Okay. Well, that could lead us on to a question on wildlife. Al, you've been so quiet over there. I just have to ask you something, right? So we're just reading over on the wildlife management here. I'd asked you just earlier about the caribou population. I was hardly even aware that there was a caribou population around here. Can you just explain where it is, for one thing?
Well, I guess the core of the caribou use is centered more towards the border. Salmo creston herd, it's called in a lot of times. The habitat itself is contiguous all the way up into Nelson, on the south boundary of the Balfour-Brilliant plan area. We don't believe that there's much use at present, and we're looking at securing the habitat for caribou and trying to encourage some northern movement of the caribou from the border towards Nelson.
At one time, was this area very rich in caribou, or?
I don't believe so. Not this specific area. Again, I think most of the concentration has been further south. Again, there was traditionally, some caribou use.
Right.
But nothing substantial, I don't think.
All right. And as Nelson's kind of grown, are we having more problems with bears and other varmints?
Well, that's part of the plan.
Right.
That's part of the purpose of this plan is to facilitate public input. If people, and we know that people are having problems with geese, and
All right.
if people are having problems with bears as well. There are instances of people having problem with bears, and again, this plan is designed to facilitate that type of input. And
Yeah. No, my sister has a house uphill, and a bear was shot there just this past winter. Poor, it lost a paw. A paw? All right, a paw. And was obviously scavenging. I mean, that was one of the ways it could survive. But and then we all know about the awful problem we have with geese here, right here in Nelson. And that's a local. I mean, the municipal board deals with that, not you people, right? Or
well, it's a species under the Wildlife Act. So again, that's
right.
As was explained earlier. There's a lot of overlap, and there has to be a lot of interaction between various levels of government and the public. I think to achieve a lot of the mutual goals that are identified in this plan.
All right. So if the town of Nelson is having a problem with geese on the soccer field, eventually you have to deal with it, don't you? Or you have to put some kind of input.
Yes, we have to we have to assess the situation and hopefully come up with you know, an acceptable solution.
Uh-huh. Okay. Hopefully. Okay. All right. Well, oh, I have a call. All right. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I have a question for Al. In regards to the statement about the rationale for the wildlife management in the proposal, you mentioned that succession of even-aged forest stands have limited the habitat diversity for the game that's sought after. I was just wondering what your thoughts were in regards to uneven-aged forest management, particularly maybe with selective logging, uneven-aged and uneven species stands. Would that help with ungulate population growth?
From a wildlife perspective, yes, I think there are a lot of benefits to be achieved through uneven age management. I think one thing to understand, though, is that not all forest types lend themselves to uneven age management, but certainly a lot of the forest types within this plan area do lend themselves to that type of management.
Right. I was under the understanding previously that a lot of clear cutting would be better habitat for, well, would create more habitat, I guess, for ungulates. So I was interested to hear this in the statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling. I think you wanted to add something there.
Yes. I think we have to be looking at, I guess, the scale of this. Like when we're looking at the whole Balfour-Brilliant plan, we're looking at one more or less even-aged class. You could still have clear cutting and still manage that larger area in an uneven age management style through clear cutting, although you'd have small isolated pockets where you would have even aged regeneration and forest coming up, but the adjacent area would be older or younger, that type of thing. So it's not to say that in order to achieve uneven age management that you have to go to selective harvesting only. There's a matter of scale involved as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you all agree with that, with whatever department you're in? Hmm? Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Does anybody want to say anything right now while I dig up another question here? No? Okay. Well, here's a question for Bob. How do the kokanee escapements in the West Arm compare today with years ago? And do you think, given the present water conflicts, can you realistically produce enough kokanee?
Just to the first part of that question, sure. Comparing historic escapements to what they are today, if you go back, certainly 25, 30 years ago, we used to have escapements of kokanee in West Arm streams upwards towards 40, 50,000. Over the years, through channelization of some streams and degradation of streams, which has impacted on habitats, escapements have gone down. A few years ago, they were less than 5,000 for the entire West Arm. The last few years, we have, through some of the channels we built on the West Arm, we built a spawning channel at Kokanee Creek, which is producing a fair number of fish now, and one also at Redfish Creek. Mm-hmm. Escapement in this last year was upwards towards 20,000. So we're making some great bounds, and I think through all the issues that are listed in this plan, if we can maintain flows in those 8 important streams which Fisheries mentions, and possibly carry out some of the other items that are listed in there with the, maybe altering the fluctuating reservoir levels, that I'm quite optimistic that we can get back towards historic escapements, and hopefully once again produce a fairly substantial kokanee fishery in the West Arm of Kootenay Lake.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Here we go, air quality. Does anybody want to deal with this?
I will.
Great, okay. Seems to be up in the air. What is happening with air quality? There's nobody that really, I mean, there's a Waste Management Act. I mean, who's in charge of this and how do you deal with it? I mean,
So the Waste Management Act deals with specific sources of pollution which impact air quality. In this particular plan area, there are no major sources of discharge into the air. There are a lot of small ones.
right.
Many of us have wood stoves and that kind of thing, and but they're not regulated under the Act. They're specifically exempt. The major air quality issue is probably slash burning in the area. It's probably the major issue up and down Kootenay Lake as well, just outside of the study area. This is, unfortunately, from our point of view, something we have no direct legislative clout. We don't regulate slash burning. It comes under the Ministry of Forests. We are presently working with them. The Regional District has just formed a air quality committee, which our ministry and the Ministry of Forests and the Ministry of Health are working on to come up with a strategy to better deal with the slash burning issue. And it's one of these issues that we've alluded to earlier where there's no one agency who has the clear responsibility and mandate to deal with the issue. It's going to take some cooperation. The Ministry of Forests have some specific management programs which require slash burning, and they're going to be working to reduce the number of areas that need to be burned. They're also looking at other options for dealing with slash that won't involve burning. And in areas where they have to burn, they're going to be looking at managing the fires better, burning at times when the smoke can be dispersed somewhat better than it is now. Our ministry, and maybe Al might want to comment on this later, it does have some impact where we are involved in burning areas for developing habitat. So it's not a matter of us sort of pointing our fingers at other agencies. We're involved as part of the problem too, and we're, as part of the committee, we'll be looking at some other options we might have. There's also the question of agricultural burning, which doesn't really occur in this area. It's more in the Creston area. But there's a number of sources, there's a number of agencies involved in the problem, and it's going to be a classic case of a team approach to try and reduce the impacts.
Yeah. Oh, we have a call. Just a minute, please. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
I would just like to commend all the members of your group for coming up with an environmental strategy for this area. But I do have a question about it. Does not an environmental management plan involve many other agencies and groups, and why is it that the ministry decided to go this one alone?
John, you took a deep breath.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of issues in this plan area that we do have sole responsibility for, or at least the majority of it. And in addition to that, there are certain aspects of management, as may have come out of the plan or out of some of our comments, that tend to be conflicting with within our own ministry. Just a moment ago we mentioned slash burning and air quality. Certainly some aspects of fisheries management and some aspects of water management where we get involved with maybe licensing water use or maybe approving certain stream activities in terms of development pressures in an area, are also somewhat combative in nature. And so there was a need to look at this from a ministry perspective as well, and a matter of wanting to proceed and get our act together, I guess, and provide a strategy for where we want to go, so that when we are dealing with other agencies, at least we know what we want to do, and we have some idea of how the public perceives us doing that and what the public wants to do, and how they want us to manage this area. And we are then in a much better position, I think, to take and deal with other agencies in terms of what their management obligations are. And I think it was just a matter of us deciding that this area was relatively important from a Ministry of Environment standpoint, and that we wanted to proceed, and really the only way we could proceed was to go it alone. It would be desirable, and hopefully something will evolve eventually to involve everybody to obtain some land management plan for the area, but at the present time we felt this was the best that we could hope to achieve.
Has that answered your question?
Yes, it has. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling. So, any other comments on that, or? Okay.
Someone proved me wrong.
Right. Okay. All right, I have another question here, and it has to do with water allocation and stream flow protection.
Either myself or Bob, I guess.
Okay. Okay, so point D here is proposed actions. Is to utilize the management strategies focusing on conservation, use of alternate water supplies such as groundwater or lake water, and where necessary, the designation of priority water uses. One thing I want to know is, how do you determine what is a priority water use?
Well, I think this is one of the things particularly that we would like to have meaningful public comment on, setting priorities in terms of consumptive use, be it domestic use in a household, maybe be it waterworks for a city such as Nelson, which involves a lot of in-house use, but there's also a certain amount of business and commercial use of water in that kind of a situation. You have a certain amount of irrigation use, and then use such as even for the spawning channels requires a license under the Water Act, and it in essence moves the water out of the stream channel as well and puts it in a spawning channel. But I think we need to have some idea of the public's perception of this particular issue within the area, and that there's two facets to the public. One is the public in general, which may or may not be directly involved and look at it from a somewhat distant perspective, which is a very valid perspective. And then there's also the perspective of people who are directly involved. Their land is adjacent to the stream. It may be the only viable economic source they've got. And so there's a number of issues along that line, and I'm particularly anxious to have the public provide us with their comments and input in this particular area to make their values known and give us some idea of maybe how we can achieve all of that, because I think this is one of the areas where we are going to have to make some choices. I don't think everybody's needs are going to be able to be met. There just isn't that much water at the low flow period of the year.
Right. Okay. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left on this program, so this is your last chance, folks. 354-4200 if you want to ask a question of any of these gentlemen. Otherwise, you can catch them at one of the open houses the week of January 24th, 25th, 26th, or 27th. If you don't know where they are or you've forgotten, you can phone the Ministry of Environment at 354-6333. That's the general office number. Or 354-6347. Okay. So just in summing up, I think it would be good if each of you just gave a brief statement. I know I didn't ask you for this beforehand, but I'm asking it now. Just anything, any other comments you want to add towards the end of this program would be wonderful. So I'll start with you, John.
Okay, I would just like to make a comment about how important I think the water resources of this plan area are, and I think it was one of the main reasons why this area was chosen as a plan by the ministry. We have in our region about 25% of the licenses in the province of BC, and this particular plan area comprises 20% of the licenses in our area. So if you look at it, you can say 2.5% of all the licenses in the province that have been issued exist in this plan area from Balfour to Brilliant. That's one aspect. There's other aspects of very important fishery that's been recognized provincially and probably internationally that's associated with this area. We have a very tight valley with fairly densely, and people congregate in certain geographic areas, which leads to conflicts. And I think we need to take a look at the issues of more community water systems, even though they're in unorganized areas, to take and serve their needs. And generally speaking, when you get a community water system, you start serving other needs as well. There are issues related to individual use that can be addressed by that kind of a system. And also, whenever you have a lot of water, which we've got here in steep terrain, you have flooding issues, which we get involved with. While we've had below average snowpacks for a long period of time, I don't at all suggest it's going to be the end of flooding in this area. It's just a matter of timing when.
Yeah. Okay. Al?
Yeah, I'd just like to take a quick opportunity here to just, I feel a little uncomfortable the way I handled that question on the uneven age versus even age type of management. And basically the problem that we see is in the lower elevation forest, all the way from Brilliant to Balfour, we're looking at a monotone. It's a uniform type of forest, and looking at that scale, we'd like to create some uneven age, some openings, and retain some older growth, some middle growth, and that can be accomplished through clear cutting as well as selective logging. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Al. And Bob?
Well, traditionally we've certainly had an exceptional kokanee fishery in the west arm of Kootenay Lake, and I think if we're able to protect specifically the 8 streams that we've mentioned in the plan, that we can go a long way in producing those fish once again.
Okay, and Barry?
Quickly, just want to stress that we do have good water quality generally in the arm. We see some problems that are emerging, and now's the time to get on as part of the solution, while we still have some options in how to deal with these problems. So I would encourage public participation in developing our options.
Great, thank you. Well, gentlemen, I'd just like to thank you all for coming here this evening and taking part in the whole program. Thanks to the Ministry of Environment and Teresa Southam, Dennis McDonald, who helped set it all up. It's been very enlightening, and I hope you folks out there get out to these workshops or these open houses. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Goodbye.